For the kind introduction, Scott. It's great to be here today.
Well, we're fired up. Your book is absolutely incredible, and it's no wonder that it's gotten the acclaim that it has. Energy and that whole topic, I think just the way that you talk about it is a little bit unique. And so
Mm.
I wanted to start. Um, there's I actually thought this quote was from Vince Lombardi, but there's some argument that it might have been General Patton that said fatigue makes cowards of us all. And fatigue is just a lack of energy. It's when your energy is depleted. Um, so I'd love to know, what were your thoughts when you were putting this book together and thinking this is vital that I get this out into the world?
Mm. Well, I love that quote, first of all, Scott. And if I rewind back to January 2020, when I had conversations with Penguin, who were the publishers for Energize, we sat down and we said to ourselves, what should we focus the book on? And there were a couple of ideas going on in my head. And the one that I kept coming back to was this idea that energy is everything. When I look back at my career in finance, the reason I decided to quit that industry was for a couple of reasons. First, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I grew up with this mistaken belief that success was defined by my job title. Be a banker, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an accountant. I quickly realized that success and fulfillment are two separate things. You can look successful on the outside, but inside you can feel deeply unfulfilled. And the second reason was I went through burnout. I was working all the hours of the day, and I realized that if I didn't have enough time for myself, it just wasn't worth it in the long term. And so I kept coming back to this idea that what propelled me out of the financial industry was the fact that I had to create a path for a better future in which I could live with better energy. And it began with my physical energy. I think that you can't really work on your mental, your emotional, your spiritual without first addressing your physical energy. And this was something that the COVID pandemic taught us. The healthy person has lots of dreams, hopes, and goals, but the sick have only one. Without health, you can't do anything. You've got to have a good foundation. It's like building a house. If you build a nice house with no foundation, yes, it might look good, but when it faces its challenge of weather, then it's going to collapse. And so you need a solid foundation in order to build upon. And that's what we came to in terms of what the book should be focused on. And through the editing process, we changed that title. It morphed into what you see on the cover now as Energized, because we thought it had a better ring to it. And so the essence of the book, I know we'll dive into that maybe a bit about my journey, but the essence of the book is that energy management, not time management, is the key to productivity. Uh, and the way I see this is that if you focus exclusively on time management, it assumes that your energy is constant throughout the day. But you and I know that it isn't. We all go through fluctuations. There are periods of your day where you have higher levels of energy and periods of your day when you have lower levels of energy. So it's about how do you work with your body and not against it in order to get the most important things done.
Why do you think, it was actually one my first question, the importance of investing in your health. I think
Mm.
we all, everyone's pretty smart. Everyone understands if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
Mm.
Why do you think we don't invest in our health when it is the key to really living an extraordinary life?
I think one of the key blocks, Scott, is that when we think about productivity, we still have this default belief that in order to be productive, we have to be busy. We have to be constantly doing something in order to be productive. But what we fail to realize is that slowing down and having rest is part of being productive. It shouldn't be a reward for having been busy the whole week, and at the end of the week, you finally get some rest, or when you have your holiday, you finally get some rest and you slow down. It is a part of the journey. Work and rest are partners of the same team. And so you've got to understand how do you find that rhythm between the two in order to thrive. If you think productivity is all about doing and you just focus on that and exclude rest, you will burn out at some point. Yes, you'll get by in the short term, but at some point you will burn out. But if you really want to thrive, it's about thinking long term. How am I getting this balance between work and rest? Now, it's interesting, Scott, because I had this conversation the other day with a friend of mine about work-life balance. So a lot of people talk about work-life balance. I like to see it as work-rest balance, because if we talk about work-life balance, a lot of people I talk about this with, it assumes they hate what they do. Now, if you
Mhm.
hate what you do, of course, you're talking about work-life balance because you want to get away from the work so you can enjoy life, and you want to separate the two. But the interesting question is, what if you actually enjoy what you do at work? Now, if you really enjoy what you do at work, it becomes hard to separate the two because if you're not physically doing something, you're thinking about it. Your eye is always out there. If you're running a business, for example, and you really enjoy what you're doing, it's in your DNA. It's part of you. You can't imagine Richard Branson, for example, retiring because business is in his DNA. If he's not doing business, he's thinking about business, or he's doing something that's related to him starting up another business or buying another company and so on. So the way I see it is to see it as work rest. Now, what the word does is it allows you to make progress in what matters most. But when you rest, what it does is it allows you to connect the dots.
Mhm.
There's no point going out in the world and collecting all of these dots if you don't give yourself the space to step back and connect the dots. And what I share in the book, in one of the later chapters, Scott, is that if you go back in history, and I know what I'm going to share is a little bit anecdotal, but I think there's a lot of truth in it. The greatest breakthroughs that we have had on our planet have come from people who have not had them because they were stuck in front of their screens or their books, or they're stuck in their office, but because they disconnected and slowed down. Isaac Newton, gravity, the apple fell on his head. Archimedes, sitting in the bathtub, displacement theory was found. Thomas Edison, fishing with no bait, so not even the fish would disturb him. Credited that 1 hour each day as where he had some of his creative breakthroughs. The breakthroughs that allowed him to go back into the office and apply those insights that he had had. When we slow down, we allow those sediments of thoughts to connect, and we're able to make sense of the world. That is how innovation and creativity is born.
Um, do you think that energy is limited or is it unlimited?
I think the thing about energy is it's renewable. What I mean by this is when you go for a period where your energy is hit, if you know how to bring that energy back, then it's an ample supply.
Mhm.
And that's why I think about energy in four dimensions, because if you go back to the beginning of each year, chances are, if you ask your friends or family about resolutions, it will be primarily focused on three things: your health. I'm going to sign up to the gym this year. I'm going to work on having a better lifestyle. Diet, I'm going to eat better this year. Or about better balance in your life. Now, these three things are pretty much what I would consider physical energy. These are part of the dimension of physical energy. But we don't tend to spend enough time on mental, emotional, and spiritual energy. Now, mental energy is all about mindset, creativity, and focus. Emotional energy is all about relationships, the relationship you have with yourself and the relationship you have with other people. And spiritual energy is all about meaning and purpose. When you're
Mhm.
doing something that gives you joy and makes you feel alive, you're naturally going to feel that sense of flow when you're doing your work, when you go about doing what you have to do each day. But if you hate what you do, if the work that you're doing is not aligned to your values or who you are, then guess what? That is going to manifest itself in physical tension. And that is why a lot of people, when they wake up on Monday morning or they hit Sunday night, there's a bit of physical tension they feel in their stomach, that fear for the new week or the new day to start. It's because what they're doing is not aligned to who they are. And that misalignment manifests itself in physical stress. That's how we experience that. That's our body telling us this is not what you're meant for.
Yeah, it's amazing. As I look back and we featured a lot of these folks in the Outlier project, whether it's a Robert Hamilton Owens who's on this call, or whether it's Joe Foster who founded Reebok in 1958, or Hap Claw who founded North Face in 1968, or Stephen Ross who's worth $17 billion and owns the related companies and the Miami Dolphins. They seem to have boundless energy.
Mm.
And the thing I can attribute it to is they've never slowed down, and they probably haven't slowed down because they're doing their life's work. Their work is their passion. It's what gets them out of bed every day. And it's such a game changer to see them, at an age where most people have slowed down tremendously, and they've got, more energy than a 30-year-old.
It's interesting that, Scott, because when I've spoken to a host of successful people, whether it's for my book or whether it's for some communities I've ran, what I've noticed is that there's a difference here between motivation and inspiration. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give an example just to illustrate what I mean by this. When I was in the banking industry, motivation tends to come in the form of something external. So when I was in finance, an external motivation would be, hey, if you hit your targets, we will give you a bonus. And if you exceed your targets, you'll get a bigger bonus. Now, that is what we call motivation because now you're pushed to hit a certain target. But what happens is that once you've hit that target, and then you have a couple of months before the new year starts, guess what? We go back to who we were before we had to hit that target. So motivation is always very short term. And it's the same if you are a parent to children. You might use motivation as a tool to get your children to do something. Now, these things only last a very short term. Inspiration, however, has more of a pulling energy. It's
Mm-hmm.
internal. It's when you're drawn to a vision or something that you want to create that is bigger than you. That means when you wake up in the morning, you don't know what it is, but there's something that just pulls you out of bed. You're drawn to do something. You can't explain it. There's this energy that drives you forward. You don't need to push yourself. Something just pulls you forward. It's like a magnetic charge. And I think that's the difference between being inspired and having to feel motivated. Motivation is short term. Inspiration is something that comes from internal and lights your fire within.
I love the way you framed that. One of my favorite chapters is you talk about turning obstacles into a source of energy. I think most people think of obstacles as, okay, those are the things that slow us down. Those are the things that drain us of our energy. And you're saying the opposite. And in the chapter, you tell a story that I've heard before that I absolutely love. But talk to us a little bit about, turning obstacles into a source of energy rather than a drainer.
Sure. So typically, when we think about obstacles and challenges, we have a negative association to them. It's like, oh, I've been hit by a setback or I've been hit by a challenge. This hasn't worked out for me. And it can take us a while to bounce back from them because they can hurt us. But what I've realized when I look back in my life is that we all have dark moments, whether it's a personal experience or a professional experience. So in my case, those moments included losing my mum at the age of 17, being made redundant, going through the financial crisis, uh, being at Lehman Brothers in the year that it collapsed and fell into administration was a surreal experience. Um, all of these moments weren't great on paper, but when I look back, they were an absolute blessing in disguise. And what it taught me is that your darkest moments, your most challenging periods of your life, they are important because they equip you with the wisdom to come back stronger. They give you the insights that have shaped you into who you are today. Now, the way to face a challenge or experience in the moment, which is always tough because in the moment it is tough, emotion can take over, is to realize that events on their own do not have an emotion. Events on their own do not have an emotion. An event itself is neutral. But we as humans, we need to we need to give an event meaning. We need to interpret it a certain way. And we get to choose what that event means for us. This is why when you see an event happen in the world, some people will see it as a positive and others will see it as negative. Some people will see the opportunity in it and others will say, this is a huge problem. You can always see an event through different lens and perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And this taught me something that few of us, I think, appreciate is that we have a superpower, and that superpower is the ability to choose one thought over another at any given moment. We live in the feeling of our thinking, which means there is no one common reality, only customized realities that our thoughts are creating for us. Now, if this holds true, this means that if we choose a different thought or interpretation of an event, that transforms the action we then take. So if you go back in time and you look at an event a different way, what happens is the action you take in the present will be very different. And the word I shared in the book, if I'm correct on the chapter you're referring to, Scott, is this idea of pronoia. Just give me a nod. Have you come across the word pronoia? Not many of you. So paranoia is this feeling that somebody is out there to sabotage you. So you might feel paranoid because you could be in a company and you feel that your colleagues are trying to sabotage your chance for promotion. Pronoia has the opposite meaning. Pronoia is this belief that the universe is conspiring in your favor, that life is working for you and not against you. Now, I'm not here to say if this is true or not. My challenge to you is just to embrace seeing life through the lens of pronoia for the next week and just notice what you noticed. So every challenge or setback that you face, and they are inevitable. You will never avoid challenges and setbacks if you are growing and stretching yourself out of your comfort zone. But when you face them, if you see them through the lens of pronoia, what happens is that you are able to respond to those things in a much healthier way. A lot of us, when we go for a setback or challenge or obstacle, we respond through ego. So what I mean by this is ego will say, why not me? Why didn't I get it? Why can't I get what this person has? Why did this have to happen to me? Why isn't God on my side? You know, ego is focused on the self and looking at reasons of who to blame and why can't I have what other people have. Humility, on the other hand, is seeing it through the lens of pronoia. It's saying, well, what is the lesson here? What is this trying to teach me? What can I do different next time? Now, notice when you see things through the lens of pronoia, when you approach things through the lens of humility, your mind is focused on much more productive ways forward. It's focused on the how. How are we going to come back stronger? How are we going to do things different? Who do I need to learn from? Who do I need to speak to? Whereas if you're coming from a place of ego, you're saying, hey, it's not my responsibility. Hey, you know, I did everything perfect. To have humility is to understand you don't know everything, that you will face hiccups along the way. Now, to transform that into something that energizes you is to welcome those challenges. It's like in a video game. I don't know if any of you grew up playing video games, but I grew up in my teenage years playing lots of video games. And what I noticed is that when you were playing a video game, it was very easy to enter the state of flow. Because when you're in a video game, there's a beginning, you know there's an end, you know there's certain challenges you have to overcome in order to get to the next level. And in order to beat the boss, you have to accumulate certain skills and tools and gear to progress through the game. Now, what if we could take that experience of being in a game and apply it to our life? I.e., how do we gamify the experience of life so actually challenges become something we welcome as a way of stretching our abilities? And to realize that if we can overcome that challenge, if we can embrace the lesson from it, then moving towards the next level in life is going to be a hell of a lot easier. And this is
Totally
where
agree.
energy comes from. This is where energy comes from, because if you see a process as being a chore, it will drain you. It will drain you. If something starts to become a chore, it will drain you. But if you can ask yourself, how can I make this fun? What would this look like if it were more fun? Then what happens is suddenly it feels a bit more energizing.
Very true. Yeah, there was a couple things running through my mind as you were talking about that. One is I always believe adversity is a gift, only because I have so much anecdotal evidence that
Hmm.
every adversity I've faced is turned into a gift. I have a friend, Kathleen Griffith, who wrote a book called Build Like a Woman, and
Hmm.
she talks about breakdowns turning into breakthroughs. And it's all so true. It's, and even if you think back, a lot of these folks that are on the call have been on calls with amazing, amazing people like yourself, and almost always the pivotal points in their life have been what looked like adversity, but turned into something very, very beautiful that has propelled them forward. It's
Absolutely. I
incredible.
mean, this sort of conversation, Scott, brings to mind this concept that I heard from a guy called Alex Benayan, who wrote a book called The Third Door. I don't know if you come across the book The Third Door, but the essence of The Third Door is that when you go to a nightclub, there are typically two doors. So the first door is the main entrance. That is where 99% of the people will go through. So, you go to a club, you queue up with your friends, you wait for the bouncer to let you in, and then hey, you're in there, but the queue's long and you have to wait a long time to get through. The second door is the red carpet entrance. It's where the VIPs, the celebrities, the influencers, that's where they go through. But there is always, always a third door. And that third door could be the fact you have a mutual friend with the manager, or you happen to know someone in the cleaning team who has a spare key that gets you through the side entrance. There is always a third door. And so when you face a challenge or obstacle in life, the way that you can make it more energizing is to say, hey, I've got a clear challenge on how to get from A to B. What is a way that I can create my third door or to gamify the process so I can still achieve the outcome, but in a different way? And and this is what I've been doing since I broke out of the corporate world and went into entrepreneurship. Scott, I think I shared this with you when we had our first conversation about how the book deal came about and how I
Yeah.
got some great endorsements. To get a book deal, you would either need to have a significant following on social media, or somebody would have had to spot you doing your thing in public, and they say, hey, I really like your message. Have you thought about sharing it in a book? Now, I didn't have at the time a huge following, so that was kind of my challenge, if you will. I didn't have the following of, say, a Simon Sinek, who you mentioned at the beginning, Scott. So I said to myself, well, that is my challenge. I would love to get a book deal, especially with somebody like Penguin. How am I going to create my third door? How am I going to gamify this experience in order to increase the probability that this will happen? And so what I did is I looked up online all the biggest publishers in my field, and I said, hey, I'm going to look at all of the upcoming authors who are releasing books in my city who are doing a book launch. And I'm going to sign up to all of these events, and I'm going to get there early, and I'm going to sit as close to, if not on the front row. Because guess who's on the front row? Either the speaker and the team and the author, or the editors from the publishing houses. And so I would just connect and build relationships with these editors from publishing houses, and then follow up on LinkedIn, build a relationship with them on LinkedIn, drop them a voice note. A voice note's amazing, by the way, on LinkedIn if you've not used it. And then I would send these emails out saying, now you see my content, it's been great to connect. I've got some ideas for a book. But I sent those emails out during the Christmas holidays because I realized that if I sent it out during the Christmas holidays, we naturally feel more joyful during the festive period. So I'm stacking the odds in my favor that they're more likely to open that email and go, yeah, why don't we grab a coffee in the new year? Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen. All we can ever do is try our best to stack the odds in our favor. If we do, we just need that one yes. We just need that one in to get us to that next level.
I agree. And voice notes are great, and they're even better when you have a British accent like Simon. I mean, then that's not even fair. That's playing dirty. Tell everybody. I wish we could show the video. Tell everybody about the signature drink that you put together for the book. I just thought that was the coolest thing, and we'll have to find it and send a link to everybody.
Definitely, definitely. So just an extension of what I just shared is that I knew that if I'm going to win this pitch for a book deal, I have to show them that yes, I know I don't have the biggest of following versus some of these other leaders, but what I do have is a diverse network. I have this ability to think different, think creatively, access this uh, I guess this insight of how to market something. And I learned this is a very important skill to develop is how to think like a marketer. So when we came to publishing the book, A year later, after we put all of these things into action, the book campaign was so successful that Penguin in the US took my book launch as a case study for some of the authors in the US. And just to share with you some of the things we did, within the first 4 weeks of the book's publication, we partnered with the Connaught Hotel here in London, which for 3 years running hosted the world's best bar. And because I knew the bartender there, we did a collaboration where the bartender created a bespoke energized cocktail. So if you were to go to this bar within the first 4 weeks of publication and you said, hey, can I order an energized cocktail? They would mix it for you and present it on a signed copy of my book. Now, just imagine how many people would be taking selfies, videos, and photos of this experience. A couple of months after the book's publication, we then put together one of the world's first book launches in the metaverse. So you would be putting on your virtual goggles and you would be interacting with my avatar. And I've got to say, Scott, it was the most surreal experience for me as a speaker because I was in this virtual room. We had people from over 7 different countries. And for me, it was crazy because I was looking at this room of avatars. There were some people sitting down, there were some people standing up, some people teleporting across the room, some people hovering in the air, and some people turning into dinosaurs and pandas. And the reason they did this is because for a lot of people, it was their first time in the metaverse. And so, we're curious. And so when the controls came up, they just started pressing all these different buttons to work out what they did. So for me, it was a very
I
surreal
love it.
experience. And more recently, Scott, you may have seen on my social media, I partnered with a Michelin star chef to create, again, one of the first ever, I think, done, a collaboration between a self-help leadership book and a chef to design a 6-course immersive dinner experience in which each course was inspired by a message from my book. So to give you a flavor of what went down, one of the themes was on mindfulness and being. And so when this course came up, the table turned into a bed of leaves through projection technology. The plate was tree bark. Your spoon wasn't an actual spoon, it was a leaf, a metallic leaf to scoop up your food. And we had the sounds of birds and nature in the background and smoke, some ice smoke in the room, that smell of wet soil.
So, I mean, first of all, it's amazing to think of this stuff. How how did you execute on this?
Mm.
I mean, I'm assuming you don't have a gigantic team.
Mm.
Uh, how do you execute on these unbelievably creative ideas?
So I'll take a step back because I think what helps you generate these creative ideas is having diversity in your network.
Totally
So
agree.
I remember when I first exited corporate and I was starting my business, the trap I saw a lot of people falling into is they just spent a lot of their time with other people like them. Now, nothing wrong with that. That's fine. I spend time with other people in my industry as well. But what I realized that if you want to think different, if you want to go beyond your industry and bring in something from outside into it, you have to diversify your network. And so I deliberately spent time with people from musicians, film directors, TV presenters, journalists, tech entrepreneurs, uh, investors, and so on. A diverse range of people that fed my creative thinking. Now, in terms of the execution, Scott, this comes down to collaboration. If there's anything I've learned, is that you never get to the top alone. The way that you progress and the way that you do things that haven't been done before is to think, who could I collaborate with to give birth to something completely unique?
Yep.
And then the execution, well, that kind of depends on the arrangement. So when we did the cocktail, I was very fortunate that the bartender kind of ran with it. I was like, here's my book, have a look for it, see what ideas you can come up with because you're the bartender. And we ended up partnering with Jamie Oliver's production team uh, to shoot the video being made, to shoot the video of the cocktail. And that's what I shared with you, Scott. I
Which
think that's
which the
really,
video is
it's stunning,
ridiculous.
right?
It's so freaking good. Oh my God.
I warn you, and I'm happy to share the link with you after, Scott, if you want to share with your community.
Yeah,
But I
please.
warn you that if you watch the video, it will make you thirsty.
Yeah.
The video was that high resolution, it felt like an advert that we were shooting. So they ran with it. The chef, I kind of fed some ideas into it because I had some ideas of what the food could look like. But again, he had responsibility to kind of come up with the menu. And so this is where collaboration comes in. You have to understand what can each of you bring to the table that is greater than the sum of its parts. So, for example, what the chef brought to the table was his experience in cooking. He was able to create an experience like nothing before. What I could bring to the table was the marketing, was helping to get word out. And we sold out of 36 seats in under 3 weeks. So I helped him to sell the tickets through my network.
Yep.
And so that's the value I brought in there. So it's always about thinking when you look at collaborations or partnerships, how can you make it a win-win? How can you both come out of it winning and not one of you feeling like you're getting less out of it? So
Yep.
the execution depends on the partnership by partnership case. But in most cases, in terms of the physical execution, it was done by the person I partnered with.
Yeah, I mean, if everyone doesn't understand why I love Simon, I mean, that's such an outlierish way to think. And, I believe every creative idea I've ever had is because I don't hang out with people in my industry. I mean, I may go to the conferences and certain things that, you have somewhat of an obligation to, but everything that I've ever done that's been worthwhile in terms of innovation has come from the most unlikely source. And that's the beauty of the Outlier Project is 750 members, 35 countries represented, all wildly different. That's where creativity starts. I got a ton of additional questions, but these guys are chomping at the bit. Simon, you ready to field some questions?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, we are going to Andrew. I refuse to call him the good. It's the great, the myth, the legend, the bomb, anything but the good. Andrew, you're up.
Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you, Simon. I was so excited about this. I was actually texting Kathy last night to make sure I was in queue for questions. So your LinkedIn game is unreal. And as Scott said, I mean, you're like an outlier's outlier. I have two quick questions. Well, one's quick. What's your favorite video game?
My video game, I gotta say, is Mario. I grew up with Mario.
All right.
I had the first Nintendo, and so that was very much part of my upbringing.
Okay. All right. The deeper question here. So you talk about, you're finding your life's purpose, right? Or your life's work, right? And you talked about motivation versus inspiration. Do you feel like an individual has the opportunity, no matter what their work is to really figure out how to utilize their purpose and therefore create their own inspiration without necessarily having to change the actual, work or job that they do? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I got the question, Andrew. So if I'm hearing correctly, so how does someone find more purpose in the work they do without changing the work itself? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and sort of create your own inspiration within.
Absolutely. Great question. I mean, I think we are moving more and more. I mean, we're still yet to get there, but I think we're moving more into a world where hopefully employers are realizing that you cannot box people into a title. And that if we want to get the full potential of an employee, we have to access the whole person. And I'll give an analogy first, and I'll come back to answering the question, if I may, Andrew. So one of the questions I tend to get asked a lot on podcasts is, Simon, who are your inspirations when it comes to business? And for me, it's not the typical names you might hear. We might hear the Elon Musks, the Richard Bransons, the Naval Ravikants, and so on. For me, it's a company and it's a person. So the first company is Apple, and the second person is The Rock. And I'll tell you why. If you look at Apple, you go back to the 1980s. Now, if you were investing in Apple stock, you would consider them or categorize them as a computer company. That's how we would segment the company. Fast forward to today, Apple does watches, televisions, phones, the whole lot. Would you still categorize them as a computer company? Probably not. I mean, a lot of people might say they're a lifestyle brand, but what they've done is they've transcended their title. They've gone beyond just being a computer company. If we look at The Rock, you go back to how The Rock became The Rock. He made his name through being a wrestler. Now you look at The Rock today, he's a producer, director, he's an actor, he's an investor, he launches different business brands. He's a brand. He's turned himself into a brand. You cannot define him by a title. And so if I bring this back to the work side of things, the way that we can find purpose in work is to understand how do we bring what's unique about us into our work. Because if you can bring what's unique about you into your work, that is what is going to make you stand out. It's why some of you, when we think about superheroes, it is why some of you might prefer one superhero over another. Now, the reason we might prefer one superhero over another is more often than not because of their origin story. You connect with something of their origin story. And you might say, hey, I really like how Spider-Man became Spider-Man or how Batman became Batman. And there's something in that story that resonates with you personally. And that's why you find an affinity with a certain character. And it's the same with us. If we can bring our story, our strengths into what we do as work, that's how we create purpose. If speaking is your strength, find a way that you can bring speaking into your work more. I was coaching someone at Salesforce, and he said, Simon, I love going outside of work to these events and conferences and expanding my network. I love learning from other people. But when I get to work, I feel like I can't really share this with my colleagues. I'm not sure how to share this with my colleagues because it's so different to what I do at work. And so what happened over time is we came up with a way on how he could integrate the two. And the way he did that is he simply suggested to one of his managers, how about we create a lunch and learn where I can bring some of the people I'm connecting to outside of work into our company to share their thoughts with us so we can learn from different people, different leaders outside of our industry. I mean, I was one of the people he brought in, but he brought in other people. And what happened is his career skyrocketed. And the reason is because he started to show his colleagues and his employers that he had this incredible network outside of work. Before long, his bosses said, hey, Cyrus, next time you've got someone into your hot seat, can we recommend you someone from our network as well? And so suddenly you got all of these emails and messages recommending him people to bring into the fireside chat. So you've got to find out how can you bring your strengths and what comes naturally to you into your work, because it's going to make it far more fun and enjoyable. And that's how that brings meaning and purpose.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
So good. Scott Raven.
Yes, sir. Simon, thank you so much for this. I appreciate it. One thing that I always love to really know from thought leaders is how they put principles in practice. So you're an entrepreneur. You're going through your good days, your bad days, your crappy days, the 30% of what you do that's just gonna suck. The world gets in a tiss and you can't do anything about it. You just gotta grind it through. What are the most unique ways that you specifically optimize your energy management that help keep driving you through your days?
Great question, Scott. I think for me, the approach I take is, I'm going to sum it up in one word. It's to be more, it's compassion. It's to be more compassionate with yourself. And the reason is, I don't know your backgrounds or what sort of work you do, but you are all going to face some demands on your time, whether that is because you're a parent or you have a relative that needs your care and support, or you have obligations from work or obligations from your employees because you're leading a team. There's always going to be pushes and pulls on your time and energy. So you have to be compassionate with the fact that there are going to be unknowns in your day and week. So the way I approach things is what I create. You may have heard of the term in startup world, minimum viable product. Now, what I think about when I approach my days and weeks is minimum viable tasks. So my minimum viable task is, if I can only get one thing done today that would make me feel productive by the end of the day before I go to bed, what would that one thing be? Because we can always do one thing. What is the one thing I can do that will make me feel productive? And then I add on top what I would call a stretch. So there's like a stretch target. If I happen to get that target done before lunch or before mid-afternoon, then I have the freedom to do my stretch tasks, the things I can do if I have the time. But if I don't get time, I'm still okay. I can do that tomorrow. And what this teaches you is the importance of prioritization. Time is never the issue, energy and priority management is. And the reason I know this is because so many people who have said to me, I don't have time, and somebody has recommended them a new Netflix show to watch, suddenly they have time to watch a whole season in a week. We always have time. The question is, are you focusing that time on the right priorities? And so when you're forced to say, what is the minimum viable task I can get done today? You have to prioritize. It forces you to make a decision. And there was an exercise I took a leadership team through recently just to illustrate how powerful prioritization is. And I said to them, let's say in 1 week, I'm only giving you 1 hour to get work done, and you have to eliminate everything else. How would you spend that 1 hour? So now they have to write a response down on paper. I've only got 1 hour a week to work. What do I focus on? And then I expand it. Now you've got 3 hours. How do you spend the extra 2 hours? And then you've now got 6 hours and so on. Because when you see time through that lens, you realize that often you have things the wrong way around. You know, the thing you actually know you should be focusing your 1 hour a week on, for whatever reason, you're not. You're doing all the other stuff first and you never get around to that actual thing that will move you forward. So for me, back to the question, Scott, it's minimum viable task, stretch tasks, and that means I can be more compassionate with myself because what this focuses on is consistency over intensity. Consistency over intensity always wins. You know, if you go hard, which is good in spurts, then it's great in the short term, but it's not going to last. Better to be consistent and building momentum than going hard, burning out and giving up. So that's how I kind of approach my days and weeks, Scott.
Fantastic. Heard and knew of bits and parts of that. I never heard it packaged in terms of minimum viable tasks. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jared, you're up.
Hey, Simon, thanks for your time today. This has been a very cool hour out of my day so far. One thing I notice about myself is very rarely do you need that day where you just sit around, do absolutely nothing, but I think everyone hits that point. I've noticed about myself that on those days, I almost have a sense of guilt whenever I take a day of just not doing anything when you need that mental recharge, something like that. So I wonder if that's something that you ever experience when you're taking your rest day. And if so, you know, how do you deal with that guilt so that you can get the rest you need and, you know, not wear yourself out?
Absolutely, Jared. And I would say you're not alone in that feeling. A lot of the leaders that I've coached or worked with have found themselves feeling guilty if they take time off. Because especially when you're ambitious, you want to get lots of stuff done, and there's always more to do. You know, I spoke to a friend of mine who's a doctor, and there's a great analogy he shared with me. It's called the waiting room. You know, in life, whether it's your emails, your social media, or things to get back to, even if you clean all of those things up, as soon as you look back and you open your laptop again, it's back in there. You might reply to all the emails you wanted to reply to today. First thing tomorrow morning, sorry, they've replied back to you. And now you've got to reply back again. And what he told me is the same as being a doctor. There's always a patient in the waiting room. And so what you've got to think about is that getting rest, having that time where you do nothing is important because it means that when you do come back to your work, you're sharper. You're able to get things done faster. You're able to show up better for other people. You know, for me, I felt probably the most guilty when I became a parent. You know, like when I was taking time away from my child, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe I should be spending more time with my child. And then I realized that actually I do need to schedule time for rest and just being away and doing nothing. Because actually, when I come back to spending time with my daughter, she's going to get the best of me, not what's left of me. And it means that we can build a much better relationship than if I'm there and I'm not actually present. Because I think what children teach us is that people don't want your time as much as they want your energy and presence. So on one hand, I could be there, but my mind is elsewhere and I'm thinking about that next project. I'm on my phone on my other hand. Or I can put those things to one side and say, I'm going to come back to that tomorrow and I'm completely present with her. And that did take me a bit of time. I'm not going to lie. It took me some time to be comfortable with that. And I feel a lot less guilt now because I've seen the results. And sometimes you have to see the results first before you can ease some of that guilt. And I know that when I do go and spend time with my daughter, when I spend time with my family, we're fully present. You know, we're fully present. And it means that when I do come back to my work, I'm back to my desk with a fresh mind. And we cannot underestimate how powerful that can be. It's not the hours you put into your work, it's what you put into the hours. And when you mentioned this word nothing, Jared, it's interesting because once a week I have a so-called do nothing day. It's literally a do nothing day. So what that means in practice is I leave my phone at home and I go out with my wife and we have a date day. We explore the town, we act like tourists in our own city. And we find that does wonders. It helps to maintain the closeness of our relationship because I think that relationships are an important thing to water. You don't want to let work get in the way of the relationships that you've cultivated and built over the years. And that has been a habit that we've embraced now for probably 5, 6 years. And we're seeing the results even more now being parents because it's been a number of years since we've had a proper dinner date because with kids, you know, you want to spend your evenings with them, but it's allowed us to have date days. So we've moved from dinner dates to date days.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
Lori and Sienna are very, very lucky. You guys have a beautiful, beautiful family.
Thank you.
Paul, you're up.
Oh my goodness, Simon, thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible. I love your concepts of gamifying your life and pronoia. Where I want to go next is I feel like it's probably something that is easier said than done. You had this really powerful analogy on letting go and how if you don't let go of the things that aren't serving you, you end up letting go of the things that you want. And I find that for me right now, that's the current chapter I'm in. I would love to know what was the most challenging thing you've had to let go and what was the most valuable lesson that you've learned from it?
Great question there, Paul. Just to kind of repeat the statement I think you're referring to, just for the benefit of the rest of those joining us. So I think the statement you're referring to was, if you don't let go of the force holding you back, what you let go of is what you want. If you don't let go of the force holding you back from what you want is what you let go of. So I think that's what you're referring to, Paul. So the hardest thing for me to let go of, if I look back at the journey, have been friends that no longer I think get the journey I'm on, and that was tough because you know you go through college, you go through your early period of adulthood, and you've built certain friends through those phases of your life, and then you go through your own personal evolution. You know, you go through your own personal development, you start your own business, you start to play a much bigger game, you start to play at a high level, and you begin to realize quite soon actually, and it is tough that not everyone is ready to evolve at the same pace and trajectory as you. And so you do have to let go of some of those friends that you've built in order to make space for people at that next level. Because the people at that next level are going to challenge you. They're going to support you and encourage you, but they're also going to challenge you to become better than who you are yesterday. And it's important. I mean, it sounds harsh, but I think in life, people are either giving you energy or they're draining you of energy. And you have to be very mindful as to which of those you're spending most time with. Now, I'm not saying I eliminate or let go of all of them. I still keep in touch with a few close friends, but it was tough because I got into periods where I would catch up with some of these old friends, but very often, time and time again, I found there was less and less in common. And I don't know if you relate to this as well, but I didn't want to be that person always being the center of attention where you kind of go around the circle and everyone's saying, oh, I'm same old, you know, I'm still trying to get that promotion or I'm still fighting for this. And it's like, yeah, so Simon, it sounds like you've been doing a lot of amazing things. Tell us about what you've been up to. And I didn't want to be that person just dominating the conversation. I wanted to be that sponge that wanted to learn from other people as well. I wanted to kind of be inspired as well. And I realized I had to shift my environments to put myself into rooms that I was uncomfortable in, because that's where the growth was going to happen. And I found that to be true. You know, I shared in the book, if you read the book on Electrify Your Environment, I went to a mastermind group that was completely out of my comfort zone. I mean, these were people that had built billion-dollar businesses, and I was the the first time I went to this particular mastermind group, I was still in a full-time job. I was thinking about quitting. I was planning this stuff on the side. And I went there and I felt completely out of my depth. These people introduced themselves at the beginning, and I was just scared about how I was going to introduce myself because I had nothing compared to what they were introducing themselves with. But what I realized is that within the next week, I had done more to move myself forward than I'd done in the previous 3 years. And the reason was because the habits that I aspired to embrace on a daily basis, these habits were their normal. They were doing this as if it was something they'd been accustomed to for so long. So I think that was the toughest thing I had to let go of, Paul, in terms of the journey to where I am today. And it's tough because you've known some of these people for a while, but you've got limited time. You can't give all your time away if you want to move to that next level. You're going to be mindful of how you're giving your time away. And then can you remind me of the second question again, Paul?
I think you kind of answered it. The second part was like, what was the most valuable lesson? But I think you answered it when you said that what you aspire to be is like the people that you're around, they're normal. So thank you so much. That was so impactful.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Michelle, you are our cleanup hitter today.
Yay, Simon, always good to see you, my friend. So I truly believe that what's meant for me won't miss me, and deeply surrendering to the entrepreneurial journey and figuring out what my calling is. But there's this concept right now about the energetics of money and being in the 3D world, still having to pay the bills, but also figure out in the entrepreneurial journey, like what lights me up inside and how to do both. So could you talk a little bit about the energetics of money and how to like use that energetics to do both, to attract it? I would love, you're the perfect person to answer this question for me.
Great question, Michelle, and a very practical question at that. So I think the best way to answer it is probably to share a little of how I quit my corporate job and began my business. Because I think for a lot of people that quit their day job in order to start their business, the biggest obstacle for them is money, it's finances. What happens if I don't make money from this business? And in the first couple of years, it's completely unknown. You don't know if you're going to get all the clients you want to get, or you're going to have the money coming in the way you expect. And so the way I saw it is that in order to have some stability, but take some risk, we have to see risk through two perspectives. On the one hand, you need to have caution in one area of your life that gives you the ability to take extreme risk in another. Now, what do I mean by this? Now, when I was in a job, I had the safety of a monthly paycheck. But for a lot of us, we don't value that paycheck. So we continue to spend as if we are going to be an employee forever. But what you want to do is to change the relationship you have with that money. So if you see your employer as like an investor into your dreams, and then your monthly paycheck as capital coming into your bank account that is helping you to invest in what you want to do long term, then that relationship, that change of relationship with your money changes how you spend it. Because now if you see yourself as the CEO of your future business and not as an employee, when that monthly paycheck comes in, you're not going to go and splash it on things that don't really matter. What's going to happen is you're going to say, okay, I'm going to start putting X% into a savings account that will build up my buffer and will help me get through the first 18 months if I get no income. And then some of that money I'm going to invest into books and courses and seminars or mentors in order to help me move forwards. And maybe a bit more of that money I'm going to put into growing my business. I'm going to invest in platforms. I'm going to invest in tools and equipment I need to grow my business. So what's happening is you're already starting to identify as a business owner. So that's the one part of it, is because you have this stability through that corporate job, you're able to start thinking logically about the path forward. What that gives you on the flip side is the ability to take extreme risk with what you do outside of work. So you can try lots of stuff because you've got this caution on the other side that is this day job. So what it means on the other side, you can go and try things, experiment, be creative, and just see what works. Start stacking the odds in your favor. So what happens is that when you get to that point, and we all get to this point, you get to this point where it's like, do I make the jump or don't I? And for me, that jump came when I got 3 paying clients on the side But I knew that if I got a fourth, my coaching would suffer because I could only coach on weekends and evenings, and my day job would suffer because I wouldn't have the focus because I'm being pulled in too many directions. So my dilemma became this: do I continue with this day job and limit myself to 3 clients, or do I quit the day job and see just how far this rabbit hole goes? And this was a process of about 3 to 4 months of going back and forth in my head. Do I, don't I, weighing up the pros and cons before I just went with my gut. And I went with the option that I would regret the least. And then I made the jump. But for me, what made it comfortable is I'd already started saving for the first 12 to 18 months, assuming I had zero income, but I had enough to cover the basics. Then, when you talk about energetics, Michelle, the reason this is powerful is when you have a good base, that means you can last for at least the first 12 to 18 months. This gives you the energetic freedom to walk away if you don't need that money. Because energetically, people can feel if you're desperate. If you're trying to make a sale and you're desperate for that sale and you need that sale, the recipient can feel it. But if you walk into that conversation and you go, this is all about you today, whether you work with me or not, it's about the value get out of our conversation. The question is whether you want to work with me and whether this experience gives you an insight as to how a coaching partnership would work together. And then you just focus on serving. Because in business school, they teach you unique selling point. But if you focus too much on unique selling point, especially when finance is an issue, it becomes an energy of desperation. But if you focus on unique serving point instead, suddenly that desperation goes, and you'll quickly find that you attract people into your ecosystem. Because, and I know this is something that Bob Burger said in his book, so I'm going to lift it from The Go-Giver, but he says that money is simply an echo of value. When you can provide and give value in a way that the person receiving it has never experienced before, the money will come. The money will eventually come. And just to give you an example of this in action, I remember meeting a prospect client who works in the music industry. So he's worked with some of the most famous names in the music industry. He's got 5 kids and he's going through a very stressful time, and he's about to go on a plane to New York to seal a new deal. And we have a 90-minute conversation in London, and I don't focus on the sell. I just focus on listening and listening and listening to gather data on how I can be of service. Now, when he takes that flight to New York, he checks into the hotel. I send him a WhatsApp message. And because I know he is into music, he is a music executive after all, I send him a link to a private Spotify playlist. And I say, hey, Ben, when you get a moment, give this playlist I put together for you a listen and just notice what you notice. Now, he sends me a WhatsApp message sometime later, and he says, Simon, that was a very beautiful playlist. And he got me pausing, reflecting, and thinking about my next 6 months. And he finished that WhatsApp message with, when do we start working together? Now, what happened is I didn't sell to him, he sold himself to himself. And so that's the gold standard in selling, is when you serve, they do the selling to themselves. Because the question is, how can I not work with this person? How can I, even if I don't want to work with you or I cannot work with you, how do I refer you to someone else because the experience was so good? Somebody else has to have an experience with you. And so this is how you build longevity in your business. You're able to build these relationships. You're able to stack the odds in your favor. You're able to increase the probability that the universe will send that money back to you through the form of clients and opportunities.
That is exactly what I needed to hear today, my friend. Thank you.
Good.
It's
That's
the
like a
energetic
masterclass
of what it looks like to work with me. That changes the game. Thank you so much. I knew you were the perfect person. Thank you.
Thank you so
That
much, Michelle.
was incredible. By the way, Lindsay Dowd says hello. She had a conflict, so she couldn't join, but she wanted to make sure that I told you she says hello. This has been incredible. Thank you so much, guys. Get Energized. Leave a review. It means everything, even to a famous author like Simon. And Simon, what can we do to support you? 750 members in 35 countries. What can we do?
If you want to get more info, head over to my YouTube. If you could give it a subscribe, that would be amazing. I've got a lot more videos on the YouTube channel. And one of the things I will always say whenever I do talks like this is I know there's a lot to digest. You'll probably be reflecting on some of the things you've taken away after this finishes. But if you did have any other questions on the back of what you've heard today, do feel free to reach out. You know, if you are connected with me on LinkedIn, drop me a message. Do feel free to reach out. I try my best to answer as many questions as I get. So if you did have a question after this, do feel free to reach out. This is me giving you permission to do so.
Simon, you're the best. I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Scott.
You got it. Let's talk soon.